Oh, Travis Mingood cell. Judge Campbell is, as I expected, taking this whole holiday time off from work, and doesn't look like she'll be doing anything until the new year. But it's interesting, even though she's assisting the church in not making a decision and delaying this case longer than is needful, she is also indicating that I have a case, that my case isn't frivolous. Because if it was frivolous, she would have done what Judge Jenkins did and what Judge Waddups did in the other case, and Judge Oberg, and that is to dismiss my case and put me out of my misery and save the church and allow the church to continue. That they have therefore judged that I'm in the wrong, that I had no basis for suing the church, that my case was absurd and without merit. But she's not. And that should scare each and every single Mormon. Because she has the power to end this case and protect the church. And there's nothing I can do about it. She knows this. The previous judges knew this. But she's not doing it. She's not doing the final blow to destroy my case. One of the comments I received today was from a guy trying to self-promote himself on my channel. No. There are only a few guys now who I will accept their comments that self-promote their channel or stuff that they do. Random Muse, the Anonymous Mormon, are a couple of examples. Because they've been communicating and they're able to reasonably respond and make comments. They've proven themselves to me. Whereas others, I will give an opportunity and a chance to prove themselves, and then they blow it eventually. There's always something that holds them up. There are even Mormons who do this. There are critics who do this. And the video I did yesterday about Joseph Smith as a translator, damned if he is, damned if he isn't, illustrates that everybody is susceptible to misinformation and disinformation that is floating around out there on the internet. And what's happened because of this misinformation and disinformation is that it creates a dichotomous to, remember psychology, the great deceiver, position where people just choose whether they want to be a follower of Mormonism or an LDS critic based on their opinion, rather than doing the research necessary to find out if Mormonism is what it claims to be. And those who are LDS critics, they fall into the same trap. they read books and material online, for example, whether it be through video form or on certain websites, and they read over, listen to, watch, and they get reinforced in their belief system rather than identifying problems, shall we say. And there's various types of problems that one can encounter when one listens to another person. Even myself. I hope you guys are being fact checkers on my information. I am not wanting people to just believe whatever I tell you and fit it in whatever box categorization you've already predetermined. Because I had to do the same thing myself. I was born and raised Mormon. And if an outsider were to look at me during all these years, they would say that, oh, I'm blinded by the Mormon Church, or, oh, I'm a good and faithful Mormon, or I'm sowing the seeds of apostasy and need to stop pursuing what I'm doing because it'll eventually lead to my becoming an ex-Mormon or an apostate. I was warned. My institute professor said, oh, don't go into philosophy of science. Every Mormon who does loses their testimony. And I disregarded it because even back then I knew that either I have a testimony or I don't. I can't lose a testimony. A testimony is a physical witness. I would deny the sun's existence during the daytime if I were to lose a testimony. And so Mormons are not losing their testimonies. They're having what they call a crisis of faith. Their opinions have been shattered, their belief systems destroyed, and now they don't know where to turn for a belief system. That's what crisis of faith means. And the hardcore Mormons who refuse to do what's necessary to find out if the church is true are putting up a wall to make sure that they never fall. The only problem is that they're in a fallen church, and they've been deceived and lied to. And so how does one find truth? I mean, yes, I've been telling you about the true faith process from Alma 32, starting in verse 28, and how that corrects the proper interpretation of Moroni chapter 10 verse 4 and 5 and Doctrine and Covenants section 10 and the Mormon tradition, etc., etc. And so I've been trying to also give you clues as to how to do this. I've been telling you that the keystone of church history, LDS church history, is Canandaigua, New York. And Mormons and ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons and non-Mormons and whatever all need to know how to do this. Because as much as it's hilarious to watch popular videos on YouTube who laugh and make fun of the church, or if you're Mormon, you only stick to what the church puts out. And I understand that view because that was my brother. My brother had grown up like a regular boy and then became Pinocchio. The cause was that one day he came to my mother and said, "Mom, I really like this song." It was Olivia Newton-John, Let's Get Physical. And I thought, oh, it's teaching exercise. He didn't understand. My mom did. She outright told him that it's referring to sex. And so my brother got scared and went, "Oh no, oh, it's teaching about sex? Sex is evil." And so my mom scared him away from the popular music on the radio. And so my brother, in order to protect himself from the evils of sex and in the world, only would play on our piano Mormon hymns. And so spent the rest of his childhood playing Mormon hymns on the piano, avoiding the evil sexualized music with their beat and tone. If you're unfamiliar where I got that from, Benson, in his solemn assembly in April 1986, was quoting from Spencer W. Kimball's Miracle of Forgiveness, quoting Kate Packer. Oh man. That's where pregnancy is a pernicious sin. But these things you've got to pay attention to, because Mormons say lots of things to create Mormon myths and have no clue what the origin of it is. So that's one thing that people need to do when they're doing research, is to fact check their own beliefs. Say, where did I get this from? And but you'll be glad to know that when my brother went to BYU, they lured him to the dark side of classical music as also being acceptable. Mozart being the motley crew of his day. No Mormon will watch Amadeus because it's rated R. He was a sexualized person. And it shows in his beat and tone, in his compositions. Girls, girls, girls. And my brother was further corrupted by going to the University of Michigan, where I got wind of a letter or phone communication from him to my mother that he liked the song "In the Arms of an Angel" from the City of Angels soundtrack, Sarah McLachlan. And I know that off the top of my head because I just used it in the temple endowment video of the man-child. And so he was slowly going into the realm of darkness. But that's why my brother will never get married, because women find that too weird, even for them. As many Mormon girls also pull that same kind of stunt, as I've learned firsthand. My brother never will get married. I have gotten married twice and divorced twice. So who's the better man? It's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. Yeah, try it. That comes from a movie. I can't remember offhand. I just remember it. Yeah, I'm not going to remember for this video. And so when somebody makes a claim, it's either right or it's wrong. That's what people need to remember. And rather than just saying, oh, well, that sounds right, or that sounds wrong, you should actually fact check them. And it becomes tough when you realize there are gazillions of claims out there in the world, not just with the church. As this guy that made his comment on my channel was promoting the new Russian-backed sources of media, as Russia was giving up on Fox News. And so I've followed his links for myself just to make sure that I was justified in banning him from my channel. And what I found, bye. I will not promote anybody who supports Russia or anything backed by Russia, because you are the enemy of America when you do this. And so he was promoting Newsmax on his website, even though he was utilizing Hebrew and being a son of Israel, which is also a white supremacist group. And so, I knew that this guy is bad news. I needed him off my website, or off my channel on YouTube. And so spamming him wouldn't work, because he actually has videos. I would have to report him somehow. But it becomes difficult when they promote themselves in a deceptive way, where they lure you in with what sounds good, and then you find out that you are now liking Mozart or the City of Angels soundtrack. Or even worse, let's get physical, because I overheard that and I went, I like that song too. I'm not going to stop listening to it. And so, I made the different choice to actually analyze how music affected my life. And I realized, okay, if I just believe whatever they tell me to do, that I'm a material girl and I'm in a material world, then I'm the sucker and loser for being so gullible to believe and follow whatever they want. And so I don't shout at the devil, but I love listening to the songs. And that's what I've come to learn, is that they have no power over me. And so, for church history, I've gone over this with Canandaigua, New York. As people assume that Joseph Smith Jr.'s use of rocks in a hat, if you're Mormon, you say, oh, it's the gift and power of God, just like the church tells me to believe. Or if you're non, it means, oh, well, Joseph Smith's obviously a fraud. You missed the whole point. Because you didn't fact check the sources where you got that information from. Whether it's from the church or whether it's from critical videos or posts. And you got fooled, you got deceived, you got lied to. And the church doesn't care about whether you're an ex-Mormon and you're antagonistic about the church and you're criticizing Joseph Smith, because that solidifies the legitimacy of the church. That's why they don't care. As long as you don't do actual research like some guy named Travis Wayne Goodsell did, they don't care. So John Dehlin, yeah, who cares? Let him go. If he gets 100,000 or 1,000,000, church doesn't care. Oh, they'll call him an enemy. They'll put it on the chart that says that John Dehlin is on the conservative side of causing Mormons to lose their testimony. But they don't care, because as the whistleblower for Ensign Peak Associates told us, the church is already making more money than tithing brings in, just in interest alone, every year. But it, like I said, it solidifies the legitimacy of the church, even though you've got all these people shouting that the church is of the devil. But nobody is actually attaching the pentagram, inverted pentagram, to the church. Non-Mormons do. I see that, and they stay away from it. But ex-Mormons are not making the connection to the church and Satan. They don't make that connection. They say cult, and they do the psychological comparison for cults. I can't remember the acronym for it, and they point out that the church is sexist, racist, bigoted, etc., but not satanic. I don't understand why people aren't making that connection who are critical of the church. Only non-Mormons do, because they see the inverted pentagram and go, oh, okay, got it. Evil. But that's part of the deception, the baggage that ex-Mormons leave or take with them. And so, yes, it requires fact-checking. And I've gone over with you, as I keep saying, Canandaigua, as I've done videos on Canandaigua, is because you have to actually look up Joseph Smith Sr. When Joseph Smith Jr. says in his history, I was born of Joseph Smith Sr., you have to actually check him, find out about Joseph Smith Sr. You can't just boot him out of the picture and trust that Joseph Smith is saying what he's saying in the 1838 version of his history. And you may know that he's had other historical writings about the first vision, but if you dismiss the information he provides, to not fact check him, you miss everything. Because you may find out that the Book of Mormon had plagiarized a book by a author claiming to be a 14-year-old boy. And you go, oh, okay, well, Joseph, 14-year-old boy, therefore he's, plagiarizing this source record. What? Joseph Smith is this clever? Are you sure? And so, when you realize who Joseph Smith Sr. was and what he was doing as real church history that the church refuses to discuss, that should be your first clue. When you do church history to fact check the church, and the church does not discuss certain historical facts, that's your clue to dig more deeply into that missing information. and Joseph Smith Sr. is part of that. So when you read in Wikipedia that he was a Freemason in the Canandaigua Lodge in New York, that should tell you something, that there's missing information that they're not telling you. But sometimes you don't know to know, which is why you need to do the fact-checking. And so you need to find out, well, was it Scottish rites or York rites? And then you need to find out about each one of those. Scottish rites have the 33 degrees. York rites have Knights Templar. And then you need to find out about Knights Templar. And that's when you find out about the Holy Grail and Friday the 13th and Kensington Stone and Egyptian treasure plates buried in the ground and all that stuff. And then you realize, oh, okay, so that dismisses D. Michael Quinn and his Mormonism and the Magic World view that I've been led to believe was true. So, isn't it great that he attacks the church, but you got to be accurate. You can't be incorrect in your claims. And that's what D. Michael Quinn did. Is he stopped in saying, oh, okay, well, this is what was understood in those days as witchcraft. Oh, yeah, see, he was arrested at the Bainbridge courthouse, where he was charged as a glass looker and had to pay a fine of or a sentencing amount of $2.68. But again, like I pointed out in the video the other day, that historical fact is claimed on Wikipedia as unclear as to what really happened. Because Wikipedia puts a Mormon author source, Mormon apologist, rather than putting a picture of the court docket that showed that he had paid the money for being a glass looker. It's a misdemeanor charge. And then when you realize he still goes on to be a glass looker, but doesn't get arrested anymore for that? Huh. Wonder why. Again, you have to check. And there's even other stuff, like Hiram being spelled with an I rather than a Y. An A rather than a U. But that you find out by going to court documents. And it's interesting that court documents tell us this, but the church will not tell us that Hiram was spelled by the court this other way. They continue to perpetuate the Hyrum. And so Mormons deceive themselves if they believe the church's lies, deceptions, and cover-ups. And likewise, ex-Mormons believe the lies, deceptions, and cover-ups by those who do incomplete work. And yes, Fawn Brody, incomplete. Rough Stone Rolling, incomplete. D. Michael Quinn, incomplete. John Dehlin, even more incomplete, because he's trusting on those secondary source authors. Same with Kay Birmingham in the Gaddy versus COP, Church of Corporation of the President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She likewise announced to the court that she had done her own independent research and had published a book, so she's therefore an expert. I published a book. Does that make me an expert automatically? No, you have to fact check my work. And as you've seen from my videos, that I've done some editing as I find out new information, and I made corrections. You know, in the book I call it Coppersmith Shop. In the video thing I did, it's Coopersmith Shop. And that being pointed out by somebody who was saying, hey, it says Cooper. Is it Cooper or is it Copper? Is this an error, typing error, or are you mistaken? And so I checked myself on that. And found that, oh, it is Cooper. And I had to actually look up what a Coopersmith is. And so that added, rather than took away from the original premise or theory that I was working with, hypothesis or theory. And so when plugging that new information in, I went, oh, got it now. That makes more sense. Because if he had a coppersmith shop and was making things of copper, people would have known this, and people would have, claimed that he had just created the plates himself. And that would have fooled nobody that he was trying to pass it off to Joseph Smith Jr. But a Coopersmith shop, nobody would ever know. So yeah, it helps to get the correct information, to find out what the truth really is. And so even though I was born and raised Mormon, by actually doing research, not like those who claim they are, by just reading other people's books and making their opinion as to what they believe is right, I then was able to identify the true historical information. And so as a manner of doing this, when you assemble all the evidence from the various sources, so Canandaigua, New York, we'll go over this again. Joseph Smith Sr. has a part to play in Canandaigua, New York. So you need to find out all about his connection to Canandaigua, New York. That he was not just attending the lodge there as a member, he was actually the master mason of Canandaigua, New York, the lodge there. That it's Yorkites, which means Knights Templar, which means Holy Grail, which means Egyptian treasure plates, which means Friday the 13th. And then you go to Heber C. Kimball, because he's a church figure, and you're eventually going to have to come across him if you're going to really do church history, and you'll come across the section under Wikipedia called Masonry. And then you're going to go, hey, Canandaigua, New York. That's Joseph Smith Sr.'s lodge where he was the Master Mason. Why doesn't Heber's account mention Joseph Smith Sr.? He knew him. He joined the church. See, that's should spark your curiosity to dig deeper into finding out what the hell's going on. Because Heber took off with Brigham Young with the current church that we have the inverted pentagram for. And so, yeah, and I warn you, learning about Heber C. Kimball is a dark journey, because he is the enemy. Because you might come across in church history or American history, because Heber's account under Masonry will lead you to William Morgan, because he says anti-Mason movement. It's talked about there. So when you go and do your research on the anti-Mason movement, William Morgan will come up. And so then you go to William Morgan and you will find Canandaigua, New York. So then you learn all about him and about his supposed book that the Batavian Press wrote. And you have to dig deeper and deeper. You find out that he was York. And that he was therefore communicating with Joseph Smith Sr. about the contents of his book. And yet Joseph Smith Sr. is the father of Junior, who comes out with the book after that whole incident. Because remember, the very next year, 1827, Junior supposedly gets the plates from an angel, which are Egyptian treasure plates buried in the ground. That's when you start correcting church history. Not just from the church, but also from LDS critics. Your eyes get opened and you're going, oh, wow, why has nobody figured this out, and why is this not a movie? And that's when you start recognizing that when certain people, whether it's the church, which is obvious wrong, or LDS critics, when they come out and say certain things, that you know now the truth, and you can easily dismiss the false claims that are being perpetuated even by LDS critics. And yet you can understand the LDS critic point of view, because they're going against the church, but now you see how the church doesn't care about people who lie about them. And so you can warn those people, no, you're falling into the church's trap, don't do it. This is what I learned. This is what my channel is designed for. To say, hey, this is what I've learned, guys, pay attention. So, I hope that helps you.